Hey guys, what's up? How's it going? It's Finite MTG. We are back with some Ravnica Remix gameplay this time. Unfortunately, I did not record the draft or the games, but I do have the game logs, so we're going to go through those pretty quickly. Just kind of look at how things went. Things went pretty well. I did another draft after this. Didn't have quite as much luck, so I'm just going to be analyzing this. We've got a nice, almost mono black hand here. Got a Plague White on turn 2. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the Juggler on turn 3 because they have a binding. There's a lot of Esper control in this format. My deck is basically Esper control, but without much of a splash. We didn't actually have very much mana fixing, and I'm actually just going to slow things down a little bit right here. And we did run into some opponents with some more controlling decks. We actually have a Skitter Eel on the splash in this deck. We made kind of an unfortunate attack last turn just so we could get in the damage and turn on the Juggler. And the bad news for us is if the opponent does choose to adapt here, we're not going to have this demise up for the Skitter Eel. But I decided it would probably be okay just because in the turn after this we'll be able to have a 1/1 Death Touch blocker available to take that out, as well as a dead weight if we need to shrink that down to size. And if we absolutely need to, we can 2-for-1 ourselves, dare I say it. It feels so bad. Because if they adapt this, it becomes a 5/5, and then Deadweight makes it a 3/3, and Grotesque shrinks it back down to nothing. So they do choose to adapt here, which is a little bit annoying for me. They have a Skyline Scout. I think I just Deadweight that one right away. Oh, I guess not. Yeah, I suppose I offered the trade first, because I would have been happy with that. And then I go for Ill-Gotten Inheritance, just trying to gain some of that life back. Unfortunately, opponent goes for an aggressive removal spell on the Hired Poisoner, which makes sense because now they're able to come in for 5 damage, but I have to figure out some kind of way to deal with this or I am going to lose. So Ill-Gotten triggers, and I draw white mana for the Oligarch, and I just demise the 1/2 right away, and I've got a double block lined up on the Skitter Eel, but unfortunately, opponent has an exile or removal spell on my Oligarch. Whoops, I checked the graveyard, but it's over here. So my Oligarch is gone. It's under the Conclave Tribunal. I was not able to double block, and they attacked me for 5. So I'm really gonna need to claw my way out of this one. So opponent only has 1 card in hand. I'm at 6 life, so I'm not dead to the next Skitter Eel hit, and I'm not expecting a pump spell in these colors, so I could die to like a Grasping Thrall. But I believe I play out the Eyes Everywhere here and attack for 3 damage because even though it is a close game and I am taking a lot of damage, I'm definitely not winning if I don't deal my opponent damage. So we've potentially got lethal with the Ill-Gotten Inheritance later, so we're just going to have to hope that that's how it works for now. So opponent taps out for main phase Prying Eyes. They hit me down to 1 life, and we have a Skitter Eel on top of our library. But most importantly, we have 6 mana, and we have Eyes Everywhere to gain control of the Skitter Eel. So we go ahead and attack for 3, and it's just time to pray. We are at 2 life, so we are dead to any Grasping Thralls. The opponent did just draw 4 cards, but they discarded 2 islands, so nothing indicating they have a bunch of gas going on. They could just have another land or 2. Though, again, they do have 1 more draw step to find some kind of answer. So I swap the Eyes Everywhere. For the Skitter Eel. Now they have not only another draw step, but also a Scry. But the good news is they are dead to either of my threats here, because they're at 7 life. All I need to do is get them down to 4 or even 5, because this happens once on my upkeep, and then once they're down to 4, I can sack it and they just die. So they need to find either a way to kill me or an answer to both of my threats. They go for a Price of Fame on their upkeep, scrying once again, and they just concede, because even though they were able to deal with that 5/5, the 3/2 plus the Inheritance was still going to be lethal. So let's move on to game number 2. Oops, looks like I have to close this first. All right, here we are back for game number 2. Bit of an awkward hand. We have black and white mana, but no blue for the Skitter Eel. We are a little land light. We've got multiple 4-drops and a 7 and only 2 lands, but still a keep as far as I'm concerned. So opponent has their own grandma, so it's time for us to play ours. Could have played the Plague White, but I'd rather just go for a demise here. Yeah, that's basically what I was banking on. We didn't know we were drawing the land, but we get to keep our 2-1, which is really nice. Unfortunately, we get super punished by the opponent playing an Arbiter there. Did it zoom me out? Because I don't think I unclicked. Yeah, I think it must have zoomed me out. Anyway, so yeah, that's a perfect target for Grotesque Demise, one of the best in the set. And we didn't see it last game, so we didn't know to expect it, but the opponent definitely got us there for not playing our removal conservatively. Still, we're able to play the Parhelion Patrol, and if the grandma ever dies, we're able to mentor onto the spirit, which will be really nice. So the opponent does go for a Skitter Eel here, and they hit us for 2 Vigilance. We've got 2 Vigilance right back. Still missing the blue mana for the Notion Rain, but we're able to play Plague White holding up Final Payment, and I imagine I am going for some tricks here. Probably Grandma blocking the Skitter Eel, Final Payment, sack the Grandma to kill the unblockable one, and then I can mentor the other one. Yeah, I think that's what happened here. And it's kind of a close call. You could argue that it's better to Final Payment the potential 5/5 here, but I just liked getting my opponent's unblockable threat off the board. It also allows me to attack with Plague White, and we have a Skitter Eel of our own if we're ever wanting to trade. The opponent just did absolutely nothing, which is surprising. So we have a nice attack for 6 here. And our Dimir Guildgate, which unfortunately is tapped, but is at least a blue source for our 2 blue cards in hand. And so the opponent, what did they do last turn? It was a Prying Eyes once again, discarding Gateway Sneak, so they've definitely got some spells in hand. This is a strong card to discard. So they're adapting here. They have a nice 5/5. Okay, there's a Skyline Scout. And they were briefly paying costs there, indicating they had something, whether it was a bluff or otherwise, maybe a bounce spell on the token. That would be nice. But they don't really have, they don't have any good blocks. They can't block our flyers, and if they block the Plague White, this is just going to die. So that's pretty easy, and we drew a nice Grasping Thrall here, so that looks like a better thing to play than the Eel or the Notion Rain, but yeah, this gets Disdainful Stroked here. So I don't know how they were paying costs earlier. I guess they must have had another 2-mana interactive piece that they decided not to use before, which seems a little loose if you ask me, but they definitely got the advantage out of that situation, countering our Grasping Thrall. So they Notion Rain, going down to 4 life, which is pretty perilous life total against 3 2-power creatures. They have their 5/5, and I believe, yeah, they decided to leave it back. And so now this is actually, this decides the match. The fact that the opponent mistimed their next play. So I'm going to slow this down, talk a little bit more about this. So the opponent goes for a Capture Sphere here, but they do so at the wrong time. I've already spent 1 Final Payment, but I've got another one in my deck. Honestly, I almost had a third. There's a third one that I passed during the draft, so it just kind of felt like I had infinite Final Payments. So this play makes some amount of sense by the opponent, but what they should be doing here is playing this on my beginning of combat phase, because now it can alter my decision making as to what I do pre-combat. And I'm not sure I would have made this play before, but now I definitely get to make this play. I get to Notion Rain looking for exactly Final Payment or some other kind of removal spell, and just so happens that I find it. Yeah, so there's the Final Payment. I don't need the Locket, and now my opponent's dead on board. Had my opponent simply waited until my beginning of combat step, I wouldn't have cast the Notion Rain because it's not an instant. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to. And because of their open mana, that's why I was waiting. I didn't know what they had, whether it was a counter spell or something like that. I wanted them to be the ones who acted first, except I expected them to do that after my like on my beginning of combat or afterward. Doing it on my main phase was, again, pretty much the death of them. So we get to final payment, sack our thing, doesn't matter, we could have paid 5, and they're just dead on board. So that's a bit of a lesson there. Make sure you're timing things correctly. I see sometimes people play combat tricks on their attack step instead of their block step, and they get destroyed because of it. Alternately, sometimes I see people play tricks after blocking when they should play them before. But anyway, let's move on to round number 2. All right, here's round number 2. We have a nice hand. The only problem is we're missing white mana, but we are able to play Plague White on turn 2. Opponent is on some kind of Jund masterpiece over there. We go for a nice deadweight, going for some Plague White aggro. Opponent has a 2/2 Death Touch. We're more than happy to trade one of those for the Plague White, and either way we get to play the Juggler. Interesting choice not to block there from them. Now we get to Capture Sphere. They're 1 blocker because the Bodyguard can't attack or block on its own. Opponent is now suddenly down to 7 life, but they do have some formidable blockers now. It's not actually advantageous for us to attack even, so the game is going longer. They're able to play this Find Broker and get some value off of that. We get to scry Grasping Thrall to the top, which is really nice for us. They're down to 5 life. This will kill them very quickly, but they get the point. So they're not going to die as quickly. I scry this to the top, but I didn't need to. I have more stuff that I didn't need to scry to the top, but I did because it feels like all my spells are good for me here. I think I bottomed Grotesque Demise because now all I need to do is have this Ill-Gotten Inheritance in play and hold up final payment, and there's really nothing my opponent can do. If I final payment, if I block the Vizkopa Vampire, assuming they attack with a bunch of their creatures, final payment, sacking whatever, whichever creature I used to block the vampire, this is not going to deal any damage because there's no longer a creature blocking it, which means they're not going to gain any life. So then on my next upkeep, they're going to take 1 damage, and then I'm able to sack this, and then they're going to die. So that works out pretty well. And that's why I bottomed the Grotesque Demise, because I was planning on this play. So they make a really nice attack for me. There's a clear final payment target, and there's a clear thing for me to sack. Oh, and they throw in the Fireblade Artist, which doesn't totally matter, but I'm not going to block that. And I actually did things backwards here, which doesn't actually, it doesn't matter the way you do it. You could block the 3/1 and sack the blocker there to kill this, or you could block this and sack it there to kill the 3/1, but either way, the opponent's not dealing me more than 2 damage, and their lifelinker is not letting them survive. So now they play a Brush Strider, which is really obnoxious because they are now up to 7 life, and this is not going to immediately kill them. But we still have some play going on here. We've got a Dimir Locket. If we wanted to, we could get really fancy and like eyes everywhere, steal their Fireblade Artist, and then sacrifice something to deal them extra damage. But we've got this Spire Mangler here. Spire Mangler is going to allow me to get in an extra 2 damage here with the Spirit, and if they don't have any more life gain, they're just going to die to this Inheritance. And we have another final payment available. And it kind of worked out for me the way I did things, because even though killing a 5/5, the 5/5 is scarier, because this game is about dealing them lethal damage, we would actually rather have the 3/1 lifelink off the board. So just in hindsight, I think that was actually correct, because they needed something like this Brush Strider in order to stay alive. And because the 3/1 lifelink is dead, they did not have additional clock. We might have to eyes everywhere to steal the 3/1 lifelink if we wanted to kill them a little bit faster. Of course, we do the final payment, but yeah. Moving on to game number 2. All right. This hand is a little cheap, unexciting in the late game, but we've got a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and removal spell, as well as both of our secondary colors, which both secondary doesn't totally make sense, but you know what I mean. All right, there's a Hired Poisoner and Plague White. We did not want to trade our Poisoner for their 2/2, but we will trade our 2-drops. Growth Chamber Guardian is a really strong card. They're just going to adapt right away, which doesn't totally make sense to me, but they can't attack. I guess it's a nice play around Grotesque Demise, which we didn't have available, but there's really no reason to adapt right then other than that. So now we're just having a nice staring contest as the opponent misses lands, and we slowly get closer to the Sphinx. So the opponent has infinitely more gas than we do. So they go for a deadweight. We get to final payment, sacking our thing in response, killing their guy. Now the Plague White gets to get in for damage. We get to play the Sphinx. So we actually got really lucky that we hadn't already tapped out for Sphinx, because we were able to have the mana up for the final payment the turn they went for the deadweight. But either way, I think we're fine here. The Sphinx is just so powerful. They showed us Get the Point, but they really need that to punish us for what's going on here. We killed their 3/1 lifelinker, just trying to kill them as quickly as possible. Potentially a little loose. They had a Collision Colossus for the Sphinx, but we drew Notion Rain, which is a super strong card. We dealt them 2 damage, and then at this point they just conceded. So they probably didn't have a great block on this, and then the Inheritance was just going to kill them shortly after. So thank you for watching that. Now moving on to round number 3. Alright, we're back for round number 3, and we had to mull the first one because it was a 6-lander or something crazy like that. This hand has a turn 2 Oligarch with potential for a turn 3 Juggler. Off-color Capture Sphere, but it's a Capture Sphere nonetheless, so not terrible. We have another Boar from the opponent. We had a Boar from the last opponent as well. And yeah, so another Jund player. No attacks, sure. And I believe I attack here and they chose not to block. Don't make plays like this. You want to attack or block with your creatures. Yes, Boar can potentially become a 3/3, and this only trades for half of Grandma. But there are Spectacle cards. This is not going to be a 3/3 very much of the time. Maybe 2-3 turns at most. These should have traded. Whether it should have been the opponent attacking or blocking here as I attacked. But you don't just want to take damage for no reason. This is like a 2-mana mulligan right now. But yeah, Blade Juggler draws me a card. Trying to get closer to Thrall mana, as we have 4 right now. Sure, they have a 3/3. They choose not to attack again, which just continues not to make any sense to me. I mean, yes, it trades with the Juggler, but at least it's doing something, right? Because right now it's not doing anything. So the opponent goes for a pre-combat Gruul Beastmaster, which is nice because it's a good demise target. We get to trade here, which, you know, we'd been able to do before, and it doesn't really make sense why they chose to do it then, but they did. So now we get to do this and pray that they don't have the +1/+1 counter card, and instead they had Titanic Brawl, which is almost just as bad for us, as they're able to kill our Blade Juggler by fighting either fighting this onto the Juggler or fighting the Beastmaster, because this is dying anyway. And yeah, they fought the Beastmaster, which makes sense. It's a decent play if they care about their graveyard, because now it's not getting exiled. And it keeps this safe in case I have a combat trick. So yeah, not exactly a blowout as it was, I think, a 2-for-2, but still annoying because it would have gone better for us the other way. We really needed a land there to be able to play our Thralls. Blue mana would have been ideal, but at least we have a lot of gas in hand. We're not winning the race. Right now we're taking, what, 7 damage, but, you know, we didn't really have an alternative line of play. Still missing untapped blue mana. Opponent has Vigor Spore Worm here, which is really annoying for us. We have to chump this because this one has Trample, so we're alive at 4 life, technically alive. And we get to Capture Sphere here, and I believe we got rid of the Trampler because we'd be dead if we didn't. We have to chump the Vigor Spore Worm and go to 2 life, and then we've got these Thralls to kind of pray our way out of the situation. So we block there, go to 2 life. What was I going to say? I think, yeah, okay, so at this point, we've drawn the final payment. We need a land. We need a land very desperately, because with a land, we're able to block one of the creatures, final payment, sacking it to kill the other. We can't sack the capture sphere because that will let them kill us. And Grasping Thrall is nice in that it keeps us alive. We're able to play one, chump, gain 2, lose 2, not really make any progress, but we're not immediately dying. But we needed a land here for the Skitter Eel and the final payment. And you'll see what happens. Oops. Okay, so we chump there as we have to. Opponent doesn't add anything to the board. We draw a Locket, which of course is not a land. And we are forced to make the same play where we play Grasping Thrall and are barely able to survive. And so we chump once again, go back down to 2 life. The opponent plays a Blade Juggler, and at this point it's just too late. Even if we draw the land now, right? Say we draw the land, we play the Skitter Eel, we block the 2/2 Death Touch, we final payment, sacking it, killing the 6/4, the 3/2 is still going to kill us. So, not to mention the fact that they draw a card off of this, the game's basically over when they showed me they had gas. Yeah, so now we draw the land, and like I said, it doesn't matter. We needed it a turn before. So we make the block, or not even. In this position, I would either consider making the block, or I would just concede, because you don't want to show the opponent you have final payment if you're going to die no matter what. The only advantage to making the block is maybe they have some kind of pump spell or something, but they also have no reason to use it. So let's move on to game 2. See if we can turn things around here. Alright, game number 2. We've got a Syndicate Guildmage, which is not the strongest card, but it's going to be good against the opponent's deck. They've showed us a Vigor Spore Worm and a 4-mana 4/4, so those nice bigger cards are good targets for the first ability. And by good targets, I mean legal ones, because you can't really target anything smaller. Alright, so we offer the trade of the 3/2 Death Touch, or the 3/2 for the Death Toucher, which ends up being correct later. And we're able to play the Locket and the Grandma on the same turn, which is just nice mana efficiency there. So they go for Beastmaster, and I believe I just removed this right away because it's a little too small for me to tap, but it is an obnoxious creature that I want off the battlefield. My other option would have been trying to flash in Spire Mangler and block it, but I don't love that play. So yeah, this gives us 4 damage. And opponent goes for Clan Crusher, which is really kind of obnoxious. They have a +1/+1 counter here, so they have a free shock, just ability to shoot down our Syndicate Guildmage, which otherwise would have done a good job of locking down this card. So I tap their thing down right away because I expect it's going to be used next turn to kill this, so I might as well get in the 2 damage while I can. And I have the mana up to crack Locket or play the Spire Mangler. So let's attack for 2. And opponent immediately removes the counter and kills the Guildmage, which is annoying because that's kind of how we were going to be in this game. And they play an Ornery Goblin, which is super annoying because this can't attack or block. Can't attack into this, and it cannot block an Ornery Goblin. But if the Ornery Goblin attacks, then we can attack. So here it's a tough choice between playing the Spire Mangler or cracking the Dimir Locket, but I'm trying to play this currently and make it a 4/1 flying blocker, so we trade here. So I just decide to crack the Locket here. We draw the Grasping Thrall, which we go ahead and play, and we're 1 mana short of the Plague White, but that's okay. No attacks. Opponent plays a land, crack a Locket, get in for 4, and yeah, I decided to chump here because we're not attacking anyway. Might as well gain 4 life and make a 1/1 flyer, which can start getting in for damage while they're at 10 life. Not to mention we have this Inheritance in hand, which has really closed out every game so far. So there's the Spire Mangler. This time we decide we just want to get in some damage, and now Inheritance when they're at 4 life is going to be game over. So that worked out pretty nicely. Alright, moving on to game number 3. We've got a nice keeper here, all 3 colors with only 2 lands, and we're able to play the Oligarch on turn 2, which is just really nice. If they have a 2/2 Death Touch or 1/4 Reach, it's actually not quite as nice for that one, but we remove it and continue the beats. Kind of an aggressive removal spell there, just because it's also holding back our Plague White, so I figure it's really important that I'm able to get in damage. And it turns out to be super important that we're able to get in damage because the opponent plays a Domri Chaosbringer, which is not the most powerful Planeswalker, but if they get to the -8, you basically cannot win unless they're at a very low life total and you can drain them out somehow. So this is going to be a tough game to win, opponent playing a turn 4 Planeswalker, but it isn't protected, so we're going to do our best to get aggressive here. So we go for a Dimir Locket and the Plague White, which is a better attacker than the Syndicate Guildmage. Domri takes 2, but gains 1 loyalty. They play a big Blade Juggler, and we just go for a Capture Sphere right away because it allows us to go for a Syndicate Guildmage as well. Of course, the Guildmage is able to tap down 4 power Blade Juggler, but we need to get this damage in now, and putting Domri to 1 loyalty is priority number 1. Okay, so the opponent has Domri at 2 loyalty. They play 2 mana 3/3, which can turn into a 5/5, and they have a 2 mana 2/2, which can turn into a 6/6. So they have some very scary 2-drops. Arguably the best green commons of each set. Back to back as well. Alright, so now we have a tough choice. What I could choose to do here is just attack all at Domri, because no matter what, Domri is going to be taking at least 2 damage and then dying. But what I'd rather do, I think, is just remove one of their blockers. So I think I killed this one, because if I'm attacking at Domri and the opponent goes for like a Soroform hybrid block, then it's going to trade with any of my creatures. But if they go for a Devkaran Dissident block, it can just eat the Grandma or the Guildmage. So I decided I needed to kill that one. Of course, I Notion Rained first. There's a Thrall. And we got kind of punished for this, actually. So I Notion Rained a Plains into the graveyard. And I think I just attacked with the 2 creatures. I don't actually remember. Yeah, so I only attacked with the 2 creatures I wanted to trade at Domri, which is fine because there's no shock in the set, but otherwise I wouldn't recommend making that play. Like if you didn't know if there was a shock or not, right? Because if they shock one of the creatures and then block the other one, they're able to keep their Planeswalker, then you just wasted all your removal and all your attacks, really just pecking away some inconsequential loyalty. So don't do that. But I binned the Plains thinking that we could look for more action in the future, and as you're going to see, we're going to get stuck on white mana here. And that's going to prevent us from activating Syndicate Guildmage the same turn we say play Grasping Thrall, something like that. So Domri down, and the opponent goes for an attack here, and we decide to block because we're at 13. It's going to force them to use the mana to kill this, and we have 2 chump blocks with this one. And suddenly now it's a target for the Syndicate Guildmage. We actually can't tap it down before they adapt, so it's kind of good forcing them to adapt here. Don't remember how I played this turn. Oh, okay, so I just cracked Locket because I'm planning on using the Guildmage. I'm praying that they don't have Titanic Brawl into turn, because for 1 mana they can just kill the Guildmage, and then I'm taking so much damage. Pretty much cannot win that game, so I decided not to play around it. So I tapped their Soroform at the beginning of combat, of course. Not main phase, mind you. Imagine they had a nice adapt creature, or I'm sorry, a nice riot creature, and they chose to give it haste because, you know, I made that play on their main phase. Not sure that could realistically happen, but that's just one way that kind of play could get punished. Okay, so now opponent's at 14 life, we're at 13, and I think, how did I play this turn? So again, binning the Plains at the time seemed correct with the Notion Rain, but I probably should have thought about the implications of keeping the Plains, because now we have a Grasping Thrall, and we have a Syndicate Guildmage and a Final Payment, and we can't do any two of those things, except for maybe activate the second ability of Syndicate Guildmage and play the Final Payment, which I think is how I played this turn. So we attack with their 2-1, which can trade for their 3-3, but only if they choose to block it, not if we choose to block theirs. So they take 2 damage, and we've got our 1-1 flyer back to, I believe, chump. Did I chump this and then kill that because the Guildmage can tap this down and not that? I think that's what I did. We'll see. So the opponent has a Vigor Spore Worm here, which is enormous. It's only giving +1/+1, but the card is still very good. Definitely one of the better green commons in GRN. So we go for a block with the Spirit, and yeah, it looks like I just made the other play, which is right, because of course they have the Worm now. This is another target for the Syndicate Guildmage. So basically what's important here is you don't want to use the Final Payment on the 6/6 and then turn the Syndicate Guildmage off and no longer have targets for its ability, right? Because if I kill their 6/6 and they have a 3/3, that could still be somewhat problematic, right? I don't want to just get rid of my only target for this. I would rather kill a 3/3 and then tap this down. But now that they played a 6/4, we're able to kill the 6/6 and we still have this to tap down the 6/4. So we get to go for a Final Payment, sacking the Spirit. We don't want to pay life in this kind of position. And that's fine. We take 0. And the opponent actually takes 2 because Syndicate Guildmage has other text. Okay, they go for an Ornery Goblin here, which doesn't totally matter. And yeah, I just fired this off in response. Alright, and we drew what I believe is the best draw in our entire deck right here. Just a 1/1 Death Touch, which is able to block the Vigor Spore Worm, of course. Also allows us to play the Grasping Thrall, and that's going to seriously pressure their life total. So I was ecstatic upon drawing the 1/1 Death Touch. And we don't care about taking 3 or the 2. I mean, I guess I decided to trade the 1/1 Death Touch off just because I still do have the Syndicate Guildmage here for the Worm. Not a terrible play. You don't want to take damage for no reason, and the opponent's low on cards in hand, and they still have only 1 threat here for the Guildmage, so that play makes sense. But upon watching it at first, I'm not going to lie, I was a little surprised I did that. Right, so we hit them for 3 here, and so now they're dead next turn because we have Grasping Thrall plus the Syndicate Guildmage, which really is coming in handy, the fact that you can activate that second ability without being able to, or I'm sorry, even when you can't attack with it. And this is actually the situation that I forgot to talk about before. So when my opponent had the Domri, right, my opponent had the Domri on 2 loyalty, there was definitely, and I remember this later too when I actually played the game, there's an argument for just activating the 5-mana ability and just killing the Domri with the Guildmage activation. However, I think the line that I took is better, partially because we wanted to play the Final Payment anyway. We wanted to get the, whoops, where'd it go? The 3/3 Devkaran Dissident off the battlefield. And also, by activating the Syndicate Guildmage, we really didn't change very much of the board. We spent all of our mana just to shoot down a Planeswalker when the opponent had 2 potent threats. So I think the play that I made was fine, but there's still an argument for activating the Guildmage. Something I at least should have thought about. But here we just get to tap down the Worm, and the opponent scoops it up because they've got 1 card in hand and they know that they're dead. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. It's been a lot of fun. I should have some more Ravnica remix drafts coming soon. Hopefully with actually recorded drafts. I should be streaming some of them. But yeah, thank you for watching this relatively short video, and we'll see you again soon.